The heat had not broken in 11 days, and now a duke had come to buy her. Clara Hartwell understood the shape of the thing the moment Hodgkin showed the visitor into the morning room. For no man crossed 3 counties in August, in a coat that fit like that, to discuss anything so warm as friendship. The contract lay already on the writing table. She had seen the corner of it under her father's blotter at breakfast, a folded sheaf sealed in grey wax, and her father had moved his newspaper to cover it the way a man covers a wound. A marriage settlement. She had not needed to read a word. She had only needed to watch her father's hand. "His Grace the Duke of Ashworth," Hodgkin said, and withdrew, and the door clicked shut on the airless room. The Duke did not bow so much as incline, a small economy of motion, as though bows cost coin and he meant to spend as little as the occasion allowed. He was younger than she had expected, 6 or 7 and 20, no more, with a jaw cut clean as quarried stone and shoulders that strained the dark blue of his riding coat when he drew off his gloves. Handsome, in the way a locked house is handsome, every window shut, every curtain drawn. Miss Hartwell. Her name in his mouth was flat, correct, weighed to the grain. "Your father is detained?" "My father is hiding in his study, Your Grace." She rose from the window seat, where she had been pretending to read. The muslin clung damp at the back of her neck. The whole house smelled of beeswax going soft, and the cut grass the gardeners had left to brown on the south lawn. He finds it easier to sell a thing when he is not in the room to watch it go. Something moved behind the Duke's eyes. Not amusement, nothing so generous, but a brief recalibration, as though she had come in at a weight he had not allowed for. He set his gloves on the table beside the grey-sealed sheaf. "You know why I have come. I know there is a document on that table that my father has been afraid of since Tuesday. I know you have ridden a horse half to ruin in this heat to deliver it yourself, rather than trust it to the post." She crossed the carpet, and the floorboards ticked under her slippers, swollen with the damp summer air. "And I know that dukes do not call upon coal merchants' daughters, unless the duke wants something the coal merchant has. So yes, I imagine I know why you have come. Your father deals in iron, not coal," he said. "My father deals in whatever does not ruin him fast enough to notice." She stopped on the far side of the table. Up close he smelled of road dust and cedar, and the faint hot scent of a man who had been in the saddle too long, and beneath the cold of him she could hear it, the smallest roughness at the edge of his breath, the only thing about him that had not been pressed flat. "Open it then. Or shall I?" He opened it. He turned the sheaf so the writing faced her, unfolded it with 2 fingers, and laid it flat on the blotter, and she read the first line standing, because she would not give him the satisfaction of sitting down for it. Articles of agreement between His Grace Tobias Stern, Duke of Ashworth, and Mr. Josiah Hartwell of Pelham Hall, in the county of. Her own name came in the 3rd clause, set down in a clerk's fair copperplate, as though she were a parcel of land. The said Clara Ann Hartwell. And below it, the sums. She had expected the sums to shame her. She had not expected them to be so large. "My father's debts," she said, and was glad her voice held. "All of them. To the last farthing. Carried, not forgiven. I am not a charity, but carried, and at no interest, and never called while the marriage stands." He spoke the way a clock keeps time, each word the same size as the one before it. "Pelham Hall remains his. Your younger sister's portions are restored. In return you have a wife by Michaelmas." She lifted her eyes from the page. "Why Michaelmas, Your Grace? A man who looks as you look does not want a wife at all. So someone is making you take one. A will. A trust. Some clause that pays out only to a married man, and the quarter day is coming, and you have left it very late." The room was so quiet she heard the dog bark 3 fields away, heard a wasp blunder against the hot glass of the window, and fall and try again. The Duke looked at her for a long moment, and she watched the cost of the look move through him. She thought, to her eye, that he was deciding whether to answer a question no one had had the impertinence to ask him aloud. "My grandmother's settlement," he said at last. "I come into the whole of the Ashworth estate on the day I marry, and not 1 hour before. If I am unmarried on the 1st of October, the bulk of it passes to my cousin, who would have the tenants off the land by Lady Day and the timber sold by spring. A muscle ticked at the hinge of his jaw. You are correct. I do not want a wife. I want the land to survive the man who would otherwise have it. The wife is the price of that. I had hoped, he added, very dry, to find one who asked fewer questions. Then, Your Grace has ridden to the wrong county. She straightened. Somewhere under the dread, a small, dangerous thing had begun to beat in her, quick as the wasp at the glass. What are your terms? The real ones. Not the clerk's. Plain ones. He counted them on the table with one blunt forefinger, tapping the wood. You will bear my name and run my house. You will appear as my duchess where appearance is required. The assemblies, the tenants' harvest home, the church. You will give me an heir, in time and in privacy, and the matter will be conducted with dignity by both of us. Tap. Beyond that I will not trouble you. I keep my own hours. I do not explain them. I am told I am cold, and I will not pretend to you that I am otherwise, because you do not strike me as a woman who is improved by being lied to. Tap. You will want for nothing. You will be free in everything but the freedom to leave. That is the bargain. It does not pretend to be a love match, and I will think the better of you if you do not pretend it is one either. 11 days of heat, and the room seemed to tip very gently, like the deck of a ship. She thought of her father in his study with the door shut. She thought of her sisters, Harriet's portion gone, Maud too young yet to know what was being lost. She thought of the bailiff who had come to the kitchen door in June and stood there turning his hat, apologetic, immovable, the way the tide is apologetic. And if I say no, she said. Then I ride to Hampshire tonight, where there is a baronet's daughter who will say yes by Friday, and your father's notes fall due at Martinmas, and I am sorry for it, but only in the way one is sorry for weather. He drew on one glove. I am not cruel, Miss Hartwell. I am merely on a short rope. You may have until the morning. I do not need until the morning. He paused with the second glove half on, and she saw, for the space of a single breath, before the window came down again behind his eyes, that she had surprised him a second time, and that he did not enjoy being surprised, and that he was, somewhere very far down under all that quarried stone, listening to her now in a way he had not been when he came in. No? He said. My father has hidden 3 things from me in my life, Clara said. A horse he sold, a letter from my mother's sister, and the state of his accounts, which I have nonetheless kept in my own hand since I was 19, because someone in this house had to. I am not a girl who faints at the sight of a figure, Your Grace. You have shown me a figure. I can read it. She set 2 fingers on the contract, exactly where her own name lay, and felt the dry tooth of the paper under the pads of her fingers, the slight cool of the wax seal. So no, I do not need until the morning. I need 3 things written into this, and then I will sign it in front of you, today, and you may be in Hampshire by nothing at all. For the first time since Hodgkin had spoken his name, the Duke of Ashworth set both gloves down again. Name them, he said. My sisters do not become wards of your charity. Their portions are restored as a gift to my father, in his name, not held over him as a debt I have purchased with my person. I will not have them grow up knowing they were bought. 1. She did not look away from him while she said it, though her heart was going like a hare. 2. You said privacy and dignity. I will hold you to both, whatever you keep from me, your hours, your reasons, the thing you are not telling me even now. And there is a thing, Your Grace, I have watched men lie to me my whole life, and you do it better than most, but you still do it. Whatever it is, you will never make me look a fool in front of your servants or your county. I can survive a cold husband. I will not survive a public one. The wasp found the open quarter of the window at last, and was gone into the white glare of the afternoon. The Duke's face did not change, but his stillness changed. It deepened, the way water deepens. and she understood she had put her hand on something true without meaning to. "And the third," he said. "Quieter. The third is mine." She folded the contract closed, grey wax uppermost, and slid it back across the table to him as though the next move were his and not hers. "One summer. You marry by Michaelmas, but Michaelmas is 6 weeks off, and I will not be carried to a church like a chest of plate. Before I am your duchess, I will be at Ashworth as your guest, your betrothed properly chaperoned. The band's red like anyone's. 6 weeks. 1 summer. Long enough to learn the house I am to run, and the man whose name I am to bear. If at the end of it you still want a wife who asks fewer questions, you may have the silence you came here for, and I will give it to you for the rest of my life." She lifted her chin. "But you will give me the summer first. Those are my terms. They do not pretend to be a love match either." A long, hot silence. Out on the lawn the gardener's shears began again, a slow steel whisper through the dry grass, and the smell of it came in on the only breath of moving air the day had offered. "You drive a harder bargain than your father," the Duke said. "My father," said Clara, "is hiding in his study. And there, she would swear it to the end of her days. There, at the very corner of that cold-cut mouth, something almost moved. Not a smile. The rumor of one. The place where a smile would go, in a man who had forgotten the road to it. Send for ink, said the Duke of Ashworth. They were married to the idea of it before the ink was dry, which Clara came to understand was a different and more dangerous thing than being married in a church. Her father emerged from his study only after the Duke's horse had gone, emerged grey and apologetic, and reaching for her hands, and she let him take them, because he was her father, and because she had loved him before she had learned his accounts. "Clara," he said. "Clara. Child, I never meant. I would not have if there had been any other. I know. Papa." And she did know. That was the trouble with knowing things. It is done. It is a good bargain, better than we had any right to. She squeezed his fingers once and let go before he could feel that her own were not entirely steady. "I am going to Ashworth on Thursday. You will tell Harriet and Maud that I am very pleased. You will tell them I am marrying a duke, and that is all true. And you will not tell them the rest, because the rest is mine to carry, and not theirs." He wept a little, in the way of a man more relieved than grieved, and she bore it, and afterwards she went up alone to her room under the eaves where the heat had pooled all day like water in a basin, and she sat on the edge of her narrow bed and shook, finally, where no one could see. A duke. A cold duke. A contract folded in grey wax, with her name written in it in a stranger's careful hand. 6 weeks of summer between herself and the rest of her life, and she had bought them. She, Clara Hartwell, who had never in her life been bought so much as a length of good ribbon she had not first weighed against the housekeeping. She did not weep. She had wept her allotment for the year in June, at the kitchen door, with her back to the bailiff so he should not see. Instead she rose and lit a candle against the dusk that was at last, mercifully, beginning to gather, and she took out her mother's writing box, and she began, because she was Clara Hartwell, and a thing not written down was a thing not yet understood, to make a list of everything she did not know about the man she was going to marry. It was a very long list. It began with his eyes, which she had thought grey in the morning room, and now, sitting in the dark with the candle guttering, could not be sure of. It went on through the will, the cousin, the timber, the tenants, and it ended, near the bottom of the page, with the single line she underscored twice without quite meaning to. "What does he keep behind the window?" She blew the candle out before she could answer it. Ashworth came on her like weather. She had expected a great house. She had not expected the particular hush of it, the way the carriage came up through 2 miles of avenue under oaks so old they had gone hollow at the heart, the August light falling green and broken through them. And then the trees fell back all at once, and there it was, grey stone the colour of a held breath, 100 windows, giving back the late sun, a lake below the south front, lying flat and bright as a dropped coin. The heat had followed her the whole road from Pelham, dust on the hedges. the horses lathered and blowing, and now it sat over Ashworth too, shimmering off the gravel of the great court so that the house seemed to swim a little at its foundations. A woman waited on the steps. Not the Duke. An older woman, straight-backed, in grey silk that had been good 15 years ago, and was kept like scripture, with a chatelaine at her waist, and a face that had decided about Clara before the carriage had stopped. Miss Hartwell. The housekeeper's curtsy was exact to the half-inch, the curtsy owed to a betrothed who was not yet a duchess, and might, the curtsy implied, never become one. I am Mrs. Pelham. His Grace is from home until evening. I am to show you the house and your rooms, and to say that he regrets he could not be here to receive you. A pause, weighed like a coin bitten for silver. He regrets a great many things, if I may say so, and shows it by none of them. Then we shall get on, said Clara, climbing down into the heat and the smell of hot stone and box hedge and water off the lake, for I am told the same of myself. Something passed over the housekeeper's stern face. Not warmth, not yet, but the small surprised respect of one hard worker recognizing another. This way, Miss Hartwell. Mind the third step. The sun has been on it all day, and the stone burns clean through a thin sole. The house went on forever. Clara had run a household in straitened circumstances, and thought she knew the labor of it. Ashworth taught her otherwise in the first hour. Long galleries hung with sterns dead and gone, all of them with that same cut jaw, that same shut window look, as though coldness ran in the blood like a colour of hair. A library 2 stories high with a gallery round it, and a smell of leather and dust and old fires that made her breath catch with a kind of hunger. A music room with the harp shrouded in holland cloth like something laid out for keeping. Room after room kept perfect and kept empty, the chairs all set at their small exact distances, the air in them undisturbed, as though the house were waiting, very patiently, for a life that had not arrived. How long has His Grace held the title? Clara asked, trailing her fingers along a marble hall table and finding it cold even now, even in August, the chill of stone that the sun never reaches. 2 years, Mrs. Pelham did not slow, since his father was lost, at sea, off the Lizard, the autumn before last. The young master was in town. He came down for the housekeeper's mouth tightened on a word and let it go, for the matter, and he has hardly been to London since. He keeps to the east wing. You'll have the south. They are not near. No, said Clara, looking out a tall window at the lake, lying flat and bright below. I imagine they would not be. They came at last to the south rooms, 3 of them, airy, hung in pale yellow that the long light turned to butter, and Clara stood in the middle of the sitting room and felt, for one unguarded moment, the enormousness of what she had done press down on her like the heat. Then she put it away, because there was no profit in it, and turned to the housekeeper and saw that Mrs. Pelham had stopped in the doorway with her hand on the frame, and was looking at her with an expression Clara could not at first read. Miss Hartwell. The housekeeper's voice had changed. Lower. The voice of a woman about to break a rule she had kept for 2 years. I'll say one thing, and then I'll not say it again, and you may make of it what you like. His Grace is not a cruel man. Whatever the county tells you, and the county will tell you a great deal, for it has nothing better to do in this heat, he is not cruel. He is only a man who has shut a door on a room, and forgotten there was ever anything in it worth keeping warm. She straightened, and the chatelaine chimed at her waist. If you've come here to be his duchess, and nothing else, you'll do very well, and you'll be very comfortable, and you'll be very alone, and so will he, and it will all be perfectly correct. And if I have not come here to be only that. The housekeeper looked at her a long moment. Out beyond the open window a moorhen called once across the lake, and the curtains stirred, and the whole hot afternoon seemed to lean in to listen. Then God help the both of you, said Mrs. Pelham, and mind the door at the end of the east gallery, which his late Grace had locked, and which the young master has never once unlocked, and which you are not to ask him about. She curtsied again, that same exact half-inch, and was gone, her footsteps fading down the long, cool corridor, leaving Clara alone in the butter-yellow room with a lake below her and a locked door somewhere behind her, and 6 weeks of summer between herself and a man she had bought with her own 2 terms and one stubborn heart. She crossed to the window. The heat came up off the gravel in slow, visible waves. Far off, where the avenue met the world, a single rider had turned in under the oaks and was coming up through the broken green light at a walk, unhurried, dark-coated, sitting his horse like a man riding to a thing he did not want and would not flinch from. Clara watched him come. She thought of the list folded in her mother's writing box, and the line at the bottom she had underscored twice and not answered. What does he keep behind the window? 6 weeks, she said aloud, to the empty butter-colored room, to the lake, to the locked door, to the cold approaching rider, who did not yet know what kind of summer he had bargained for. I have got 6 weeks. Let us see what they will buy. And she went down to meet him. The rider came up the last of the avenue and into the great court while Clara was still on the stair, so that she reached the foot of it just as the gravel sounded under his horse. And they met, Duke and bought bride, in the wide hot doorway with the whole shimmering forecourt behind him and the cool stone dark of the hall behind her, and neither of them quite inside the house nor out of it. He swung down. A groom came running from the stable arch, and the Duke handed off the reins without a word and without looking, the way a man does a thing he has done 10,000 times, and drew off his gloves finger by finger. Up close the road was on him again, dust greyed along the seams of his coat, a line of it at his collar, where the sweat had run, the same hot cedar and leather scent she had marked in her father's morning room 3 counties and a lifetime ago. Miss Hartwell. He inclined. The economy of it had not changed. You are early. You are late, Your Grace. I am told you regret it. She let that sit a moment in the heavy air. Mrs. Pelham delivered the regret very handsomely. I shouldn't trouble to add to it. A groom's bucket clanked somewhere. A pigeon went up off the parapet with a clap of wings. The Duke looked at her, and she watched him take her in, the travelling dress gone limp at the collar, the dust of her own road on her hem, the chin she had not lowered, and she had the satisfaction, small and warm and entirely her own, of seeing him decide not to apologize. Then I won't, he said. You've seen the house. I have seen a great deal of empty rooms kept very clean, and a library I should like to be left alone in for a week, and a door at the end of the east gallery I am told not to ask you about. She drew her own gloves through her fingers. I have not asked. I am only telling you that I have been told. I find it answers, between us, to say a thing plainly rather than have you wonder whether I am wondering. The line of his jaw tightened, that small tick at the hinge she had begun to read like print. Mrs. Pelham talks. Mrs. Pelham warned. There is a difference, and I think you know it, and I think it is why you keep her. Clara stepped back to let him pass into the dark cool of the hall, and the temperature dropped against her damp neck like a hand laid flat. I dine at 6 at home, Your Grace, but I imagine a duke dines later and dresses for it. I shall be ready whenever your house requires me to be. I should like, before then, to know whether I am to talk to you at table or sit silent and decorative, because I can manage either, but I cannot manage guessing. He paused under the hall's great cold lantern, half in shadow, the dust still on him, and for a moment she thought she had pressed too hard too soon. Then, you may talk, he said. I am told I am poor company. You will not improve me, but you may talk. I shall consider that a victory, said Clara, and quit the field before you take it back. And she went up to dress, and did not let herself smile until the turn of the stair had taken her out of his sight. They dined in a room built to seat 40, at a table laid for 2, with such a length of polished mahogany between his place and hers that Clara, sitting down, very nearly laughed aloud. Branches of candles ran the distance like watchfires down a road. A footman stood at each end as though to relay messages across the gulf. The windows had been thrown up against the heat, and the night came in smelling of cut grass and lake water, and the white musk of the night stocks under the terrace, and moths blundered softly at the candle glass, and somewhere out in the dark a nightjar chirred and chirred. "Your Grace." Clara unfolded her napkin. "I can see your mouth move, but I confess I shall not hear a word you say. Shall I send my replies by footman or by post?" The Duke, 20 feet away, lifted his eyes from his soup. "The table seats the family," he said. "There has not been a family to seat for some time. Then, it is fortunate I am loud." She set down her spoon. Tobias, his name. She had read it off a contract in grey wax, and now she spent it deliberately, to see what it bought. "I am to be your wife in 6 weeks. I will not shout my whole marriage down 40 feet of mahogany at 2 footmen who are too well trained to laugh. Either move me up, or come down, but I will not be governed by a table." A silence. The nearer footman's face achieved a stillness so total it was its own opinion. "Hodgkin," said the Duke. No, not Hodgkin, but had been her father's man. Here it was Marsh. Marsh. Lay Miss Hartwell's place again. There. He pointed to the chair at his right hand, and the footman moved with the smooth speed of a man glad of a clear order, and Clara gathered her glass, and went the length of the room to sit beside the cold Duke of Ashworth, close enough now to see the road burn the wash, had not quite taken off his cheekbone, close enough to hear that small roughness still at the edge of his breath. "Better," she said. "You are," he observed, to his soup. "A great deal of management for a man who wished only to comply with a will. You bought a coal merchant's daughter, Your Grace." "Iron," he said. "Your father deals in iron." "My father," said Clara, "deals in whatever does not ruin him fast enough to notice. We have established this, and you remembered it, which I shall now spend the rest of dinner being unbearably pleased about." She tasted the soup. It was very good and very cold, and she was glad of both. "What do you do all day, in a house you have shut up like a chest?" He told her, in the flat-weighed sentences she was learning, were not coldness exactly, but a kind of rationing. The home farm, the drainage of the low meadows that flooded every spring and starved the tenants of a hay crop, a dispute with the mill at Coombe that had run since his father's time. The accounts he kept himself, because the last steward had kept them creatively. She listened the way she had listened to her own father's books at 19, hearing under the figures the shape of the trouble, and twice she asked a question that made him stop and look at her, and the second time he set down his fork. "You understand a ledger," he said. "I told you I did. You did not believe me. Men never do, the first time, and then they are amazed, as though I had taught a horse to read." She reached, without asking, for the salt at his elbow, and her fingers and his were a hand's breadth apart on the cloth, and neither of them moved the hand away with any speed. "The low meadows. You are draining them downhill into the lake. That is why your lake is silting at the south end. Mrs. Pelham's girl said the boat grounds where it never used to. You are curing one trouble by feeding another." The Duke was quiet a long moment. A moth reached the candle at last, and went up in a small bright fizz. "My grandmother," he said, "warned me the will would fetch me a wife who knew her own mind. I had taken it for a threat. And was it? I have not yet decided." He looked at her sidelong, and there it was again. The place where a smile would go in a man who had forgotten the road to it, only this time it travelled an inch further than it had in the morning room at Pelham. "She also warned me," he added, very dry, "that I should be made to move down the table. I told her no woman living would manage it. I find I owe her an apology, and she is not here to enjoy it, which is precisely the sort of arrangement she preferred." It was so unexpected, the dryness of it, the small dead grandmother enjoying her victory from beyond the reach of apology, that Clara laughed before she could stop herself. A real laugh, startled out of her, and she saw the Duke register it the way a man registers a sound he had not known he was listening for. He did not laugh back, but the window behind his eyes lifted half an inch, and stayed. "You have made a joke, Your Grace," she said, when she had her breath. "I shall write the date in my book. Do not grow accustomed to it," he said. "I am told it does not become me." Mrs. Pelham? My cousin, said the Duke, and the half-inch came down again all at once, the curtain dropping, and into the cooling room. As though the name had been a key turned in a lock, came the sound of a carriage on the gravel of the great court, late and fast, and entirely unannounced. The Duke went still in the particular way she was learning meant something had gone wrong, and would not be permitted to show it. Marsh the footman had gone to the window. A travelling chaise. Your Grace, he said. I believe it is Mr. Stern, Your Grace. At this hour, said the Duke, and rose, and the napkin fell from his knee to the floor, and he left it there, which told Clara more than his face did. Crispin Stern came into the dining room 10 minutes later on a wave of road dust and easy laughter, peeling off driving gloves, calling for wine before he had finished crossing the threshold, and he was, Clara saw at once, beautiful the way his cousin was handsome, but warmed, lit from within by the pleasure of his own arrival, with the same stern jaw worn loose and charming, and a mouth that had never in its life forgotten the road to a smile. He used it now, full and bright, and it did not reach his eyes, which were doing arithmetic. Tobias, you wretch, you've dined without me. He stopped, theatrically, at the sight of Clara in the chair at the Duke's right hand, and in such company. Good God! The county said you'd bought yourself a bride, and I called the county a liar, Tobias Stern, who would not dance at his own coming of age, courting in August, and here she sits. Madam, I am desolate that no one thought to send for me. I am his only family, you understand. One likes to be present when one is being disinherited. Crispin, the single word carried the whole weight of the table down it. Oh, don't Crispin me, cousin. I have driven since noon in this heat on the strength of a rumour, and I find the rumour wearing yellow and eating your soup. He pulled out a chair, uninvited, and dropped into it, and snapped his fingers for the wine, and the footman looked to the Duke before he poured, which Clara marked, and which Crispin marked that she had marked. Miss Hartwell, said Clara. Hartwell. He let the name turn over on his tongue like a coin held to the light, looking for the false ring of it. Hartwell. Surely not Josiah Hartwell's girl? The Iron Man? The one the bailiffs were so warm upon this spring? His smile widened, delighted, terrible. Oh, but this is rich. This is better than the county dared dream. Tobias, you have married 3 counties' worth of unpaid notes to keep your grandmother's acres out of my hands. You have bought yourself a wife with a will and a quarter day. Tell me, does she know? Does she know she's a clause? She knows, said Clara, before the Duke could speak, that you have ridden a great way to be unpleasant, Miss Stern, and that you are doing it on an empty stomach, which can only sour the performance. Marsh, lay Mr. Stern a place. She turned the full of her attention on him, calm as still water. I read the contract before I signed it. I read it standing. I know precisely what I am, which is more than most brides can say, and a great deal more than you appear to know, which is why you are shouting it across a dinner table as though it were news. For half a second the charm slipped, and she saw underneath it the cold thing doing sums, and the cold thing did not like her. She speaks, Crispin said softly, recovering, lifting his refilled glass to her. How novel. Tobias's last notion of conversation was a long silence, and a longer one. Well, to the betrothal then, to Miss Hartwell, who has read the contract. He drank. I do hope, my dear, that you read all of it. My cousin is a great keeper of doors, you know. He keeps one in particular. His eyes flicked, lazy and deliberate, toward the east. Locked, these 2 years. I dare say he hasn't shown it you. He doesn't show it anyone. But then, a wife is not anyone, is she? A wife has rights, and you'll want to know, before Michaelmas, what manner of house you're. Enough. The Duke had not raised his voice. He had not needed to. She had watched him say so himself, in another room, a lifetime ago. He stood now with both hands flat on the cloth and the candlelight hard along the bones of his face. You will sleep here tonight, because I will not turn a horse out into this heat, mine or yours. You will go in the morning, and you will not speak of that door again under this roof, to her or to anyone, or by God, Crispin, will or no will. I will let the whole of it fall to you, and burn the timber myself, before you have a stick of it." Silence. The nightjar had stopped. Even the moths seemed to hang. "There he is," said Crispin very quietly, and his smile when it came back was the worst thing Clara had seen all evening, because it was satisfied. "There's the cousin I know. You see, Miss Hartwell, you can wake him." I'd begun to think no one could. He rose, unhurried, and bowed to her with an elegance that mocked itself. "We'll talk, you and I, before I go. I think we should. I think there are things a clause ought to know about the ledger it's been written into." And he went out, calling lightly for someone to show him a room, leaving his wine half drunk, and the whole table changed behind him. Clara let out a breath she had not known she was holding. Beside her the Duke stood looking at the door his cousin had gone through, and his hand, flat on the white cloth, had closed slowly into a fist. "He is your heir," she said. It was not a question. "Until I marry. Then, my son is, if I have one, and if I have none it returns to him at my—" He stopped, chose another word. "In the end. He has spent 2 years certain of it. My grandmother's will took the certainty from him in an afternoon." The fist opened. "I am sorry you were made to sit through that. It was the one thing I asked you to be spared, and the one thing I could not spare you. You did not make me a fool in front of your servants, Tobias." She used his name again, gently this time, and saw it land. "He did. There is a difference, and your people know it. Marsh waited on your word before he poured the man wine in your own house. That is not nothing. That is a household that knows whose roof it is." She rose and stood beside him, the two of them at the head of the long, bright, ruined table. "But he is right about one thing, and I will say it plainly because we agreed to plainness. There is a door, and he means to use it against you and against me, and I would rather hear what is behind it from you than from him." The window came down. She watched it come, this time all the way. "There is nothing behind it that concerns the bargain," said the Duke of Ashworth. "Good night, Miss Hartwell. Marsh will see you up." And he left her there among the guttering candles, and the night stocks breathed in cold and sweet through the open windows, and Clara stood a long while with her hand on the back of his empty chair, learning the exact shape of the thing she had not been told. She did not sleep. The heat soared to the first half of the night, and her own mind to the second, and somewhere past 2, when the house had gone entirely quiet, when even the boards had stopped ticking, she rose, and lit her candle, and took her mother's writing box onto her knees by the open window, and added 3 lines to her list in a hand that the dark made unsteady. "The cousin wants the door used as a weapon. The Duke would burn the timber before he let it fall to him. He said so, and meant it, and a cold man does not threaten to burn a thing he does not love. And under it, third, he is not protecting a secret. He is protecting a room." It was while she sat there, the candle throwing her shadow tall up the butter-yellow wall, that she heard it, not the cousin. The cousin slept in the west, 2 corridors and a stair away. This came from the east, from across the dark well of the house, faint and thread-like, and almost lost under the churr of the nightjar, starting up again over the lake. Music, a single line of it, picked out slow, and one-fingered, and stopping, and starting, and stopping, on an instrument so long unused that even at this distance she could hear the dust in it, the slight buzz of a string gone slack with 2 years of silence. Clara sat very still. The music room she had passed that afternoon had its harp under holland cloth, shrouded like something laid out for keeping. This was not the harp. This came from further off, from beyond the music room, from the locked end of the east gallery, where a door had stood shut for 2 years, and where no one, the housekeeper had said, was ever to go. The single line climbed, faltered on a note it could not reach, and fell silent. She was on her feet before she had decided to be, her candle in her hand, her bare feet finding the cool boards. Mind the door at the end of the east gallery, which you are not to ask him about. She had not asked. She was not going to ask. She was going to look, and she got as far as her own sitting room door, her hand on the cold brass of the latch, the whole sleeping weight of Ashworth waiting on the other side of it, before a second sound stopped her cold. Footsteps. In the corridor, coming her way, unhurried, and beneath them the soft drag of a hand trailing along the paneling, the walk of a man who knew the house in the dark and did not care who heard him learn it. They slowed outside her door. They stopped. Clara stood frozen in her own dark room, with the candle shaking small shadows up the walls, and through the thin gap beneath the door she watched a line of answering light steady itself, and hold, and wait. And then a voice came through the wood, low and pleased and wide awake, and it was not the Duke's. "You heard it too," said Crispin Stern, through the door, almost tenderly. "I thought you might. Light sleepers, the both of us. Shall I tell you what it is, my dear, before he can think of a reason not to?" Clara did not open the door. She stood with her hand on the cold brass and her candle making the shadows lean, and she let the silence go on long enough that a lesser man would have filled it. Crispin Stern was not a lesser man. He waited on his side of the wood as patiently as she waited on hers, and she could hear him breathing, easy and amused, and the faint creak of his weight shifting from one foot to the other on a board that had not ticked once for the Duke. "You will catch a chill, standing there deciding," he said. "Though in this heat I grant you it would be an achievement. I am not deciding, Mr. Stern. I am declining." She kept her voice level, pitched low against the sleeping house. "It is 2 in the morning. Whatever you have to say to me will keep until a Christian hour, and will sound a great deal less like a snake for being said in daylight." A soft laugh, delighted, through the paneling. "Oh, she's good. Tobias, you wretch, you've found one with teeth." A pause, and then the charm dropped a register, went confiding, went almost kind, which was worse. "You heard the music. Don't trouble to deny it. I watched the line of your candle stop when it started. One-fingered, stopping and starting. On a thing so long out of tune it buzzes like a fly in a jar." The latch under her palm seemed to grow colder. "Do you know what it is you heard, Miss Hartwell? Shall I be the one to tell you, since he never will?" She said nothing. The night stocks breathed in cold and sweet through her open window behind her. Somewhere the nightjar churred and went still. "It is my uncle's tune," Crispin said. "The late Duke. A clumsy little air he could never get past the 4th bar of, on the spinet in his own rooms, at the end of the East Gallery, behind the door you've been warned off. He played it the night before he sailed. He has not played it since, for the very good reason that the sea off the Lizard saw to that the autumn before last." His voice softened further, the way oil softens a hinge. "And yet you heard it tonight. Did you not?" Slow, one finger. Stopping and starting. "Now ask yourself, my dear, who is it in that locked room, 2 years on, picking out a lost man's tune in the dark? And ask yourself why my cousin would rather you took it for a ghost than knew the truth of it." Clara's heart had begun the hair's beat again, quick under her ribs. She pressed her palm flat to the wood, as though she could feel through it whether he lied. "You have ridden a long way to frighten a woman through a door. I have ridden a long way to warn one," he said. "There is a difference, as you told my cousin so prettily at dinner, and I think you know it. Come to the library before I go in the morning. 8 o'clock, he rides the home farm at 7, and will not trouble us. I have something to show you. Paper, Miss Hartwell, not gossip. A thing with a seal on it that concerns you very nearly. You signed a contract you read standing up. Come and read the one you did not." His footsteps began to withdraw, unhurried, the soft drag of his hand trailing the paneling. "Sleep, if you can. I never can in this house. Too many doors." The light beneath her door slid away down the corridor and was gone. Clara stood a long time in the dark with the cooling brass under her hand and the candle guttering and the buzzing one-fingered tune playing itself over and over in her memory, until she could not be sure she had ever truly heard it at all. She did not go to the library to be Crispin Stern's creature. She went because she would not be anyone's fool, his or her own, and because a woman who keeps accounts cannot bear an entry she has not seen. But first, in the grey hour before the house woke, when the heat had thinned to something almost like coolness, and the lake lay below her window flat as poured pewter, she went east. The morning gallery was a long, cool tunnel of shadow, the Holland blinds still down, the Sterns dead, and gone looking out of their frames with that same shut window stare. Her bare feet found the runner. The boards beneath it were grit cool, untouched by the sun that never reached this side until noon. The music room came and went on her left, the harp a pale, shrouded shape behind its glass doors. And then, the gallery narrowed and ran on past where the housekeeper's tour had turned her back, and ended, as Mrs. Pelham had said it would, as Crispin had said it would, in a single door. It was an ordinary door. That was the thing she had not expected. She had built it tall and iron-bound in her mind, and it was only oak, panelled like the rest, with a brass plate gone dull and a keyhole dark as a struck match. Above it the wall held the ghost of a portrait long since taken down, a clean oblong where the panelling had not faded. She stood before it in her wrapper, with her hair down her back, and put 2 fingers to the wood the way she had put them to the contract. Flat, exact, asking nothing aloud. The wood was warm. Not sun-warm. The sun was on the other front entirely. Warm the way a chimney breast is warm, the way a thing is warm that has had a fire near it not long since. Clara drew her hand back as though the door had spoken. Miss Hartwell. She turned. Mrs. Pelham stood 10 feet down the gallery, fully dressed, the chatelaine silent at her waist, because she held it still in one hand, and her face in the grey light was not stern so much as tired to the bone. I was told not to ask, Clara said. I have not asked. I came to look. There is a difference, and I think you of all people know it. There is, the housekeeper agreed, and came no closer. And there is also a difference, miss, between a door a man keeps shut from spite and a door he keeps shut to go on breathing. You'll not learn which this is by warming your hand on it. She looked at the panelling, and something moved behind her own eyes, gone before Clara could name it. His late grace and the young master parted hard. The night before the carriage came to take his father to the coast, there were words in that room that the whole East Wing heard, and none of us has repeated. And I'll not begin with you, betrothed or no. The sea did the rest. And the young master came home and locked the door with the words still in it, and there they have stayed. Her mouth tightened. He keeps it warm, miss. That is all I will say, and it is more than I should. He keeps it warm. He goes in, Clara said slowly. At night. He plays, I have said what I will say. Mrs. Pelham's voice came down like a window sash. And I will add only this, because you came down here barefoot at 5 in the morning, which tells me you are the kind that cannot leave a sum half-worked, mister. Crispin would give a very great deal to have what is behind that door. He has tried locks, and he has tried lawyers, and now, her eyes went over Clara, head to bare heel. Now I see he is trying a wife. Do not be his key, Miss Hartwell. Whatever else you are in this house, do not be that. She turned and went, her tread soundless on the runner, and left Clara alone in the long grey gallery, with her hand still half raised toward a warm door she had been told a 3rd time not to open. Crispin was in the library at 8, as he had promised, lounging in the window embrasure with the early sun already hard behind him, and a leather folder open on his knee. He had dressed for the road, booted and brushed. The easy ruin of the night before pressed out of him, only the arithmetic in his eyes was the same. He did not rise. You came, he said, pleased. I confess I'd laid a small private wager you would, and against myself, which is the only way I ever win. I came to see your paper. Clara stopped well short of him, the long room's 2 stories of leather and dust rising about her, the gallery overhead, a smell she had loved on sight yesterday and could not quite love this morning. Show it, and spare me the overture. I have a household to learn before noon, and you have a horse waiting. Brisk. He'll find that wearing, in a year or two. Crispin drew a single sheet from the folder, held it a moment, watching her, savoring. Our grandmother's will, Miss Hartwell. Or the relevant clause of it, copied fair by my own man, who had it from the registry, which is a public place and tells no lies. You'll know my cousin's version. He marries by Michaelmas. He comes into the whole estate, and if he does not, it falls to wicked Crispin, who would have the tenants off by Lady Day. He smiled. A pretty story. He left a word out. Read. She took it. She read it standing, as she had read the dry tooth of the paper under her fingers and the morning glare cutting white across the lines, and she found the clause, and she found the word he meant, and the room tipped very gently, as the morning room at Pelham had tipped a lifetime ago. Provided always that the said marriage be contracted in good faith, and not procured by purchase, settlement of debt, or other inducement. Any marriage so procured to be void as against the provisions herein, and the estate to descend as if the said duke had remained unwed. You see it, Crispin said softly, watching her face. I knew you would. Procured. By settlement of debt. My dear, your father's notes are the inducement. The contract you read standing up is the procuring. The very thing that brought you bride to him voids the marriage that was meant to save the land. He cannot pay your father's debts and keep the estate. He can do one or the other. And he has chosen, has he told you which? He has chosen to do both, and trust that no one will trouble to read the registry. He let that land. I have read the registry. I will read it aloud, in a courtroom, the week after your wedding, and the estate will come to me with the marriage hanging round your neck like a millstone, a duchess in name, ruined in fact. Your father's debts come due all the same, because the man who carried them will have nothing left to carry them with. Clara's hands were quite steady on the paper. That was the strange thing she would remember after, that her hands did not shake while everything under them came apart. Why tell me, she said. Because I am not the monster the housekeeper paints, whatever you've been told. He rose now, unhurried, and his voice when it came was almost gentle, and that was the worst of all his weapons. I do not want you ruined, Miss Hartwell. I have no quarrel with you. You are merely standing where the lightning means to fall. Leave, before the banns are read. Go home, and I will see, quietly, in my own name, that the worst of your father's notes are answered, the ones with the bailiffs behind them. You lose a duke you never wanted. You keep your name, your sister's portions, your father's roof. And the estate comes to its proper heir, without a soul the wiser. He held out his hand for the paper, palm up, like a man taking back a card. Or stay, and marry a clause that the law will tear up, and be the byword of 3 counties by Christmas. I have laid both before you. I think that more honest than anything my cousin has told you since you came. The sun climbed another inch, and laid a bar of white across the library floor between them. Out beyond the windows the heat was rising off the gravel again, in its slow visible waves. The 12th day of it, the country gone to dust and brass. Clara folded the paper along its crease, and did not give it back. I will keep this, she said. You copied it for me. I shall take you at your generosity. Good morning, Mr. Stern. Your horse is waiting, and so, I find, is my whole life. And I should like to look at both, before I decide which of them you have ruined. His smile flickered, that half-second slip, the cold thing doing sums behind it. And then he laughed, and bowed, and left her, and she heard the chaise go down the avenue under the hollow oaks 10 minutes later, fast and triumphant, and gone. She did not weep. She sat down in the great dim library with the will folded in her lap and the dust turning gold in the bar of sun, and she made herself work the sum, as she had worked every sum that had ever frightened her, until the fear had a shape she could hold. She found the Duke at noon in the low meadows. She had not meant to. She had meant to keep to the house and her own counsel, until she knew which of 2 liars had told her the nearer truth. But the meadows were where Crispin had said he would not be, and so they were where she went. Down the long, hot slope past the silting south end of the lake where the boat lay grounded on dried mud, cracked into 1,000 grey plates. And there he was, coat off, shirt sleeves rolled, standing knee-deep in a ditch with a labourer beside him, and a drainage plan pegged out on the bank, with stones at its corners against the wind that was not blowing. He looked up, and the sight of her stopped him, with the spade half lifted, and for a moment, before the window came down, she saw something cross his face that was almost gladness, and was certainly surprise, and she stored it away with the other small coins she had been hoarding since the morning room at Pelham. Miss Hartwell. He climbed out of the ditch, scrubbing his hands down his thighs, and the labourer found business elsewhere, with the speed of a man who knows when to. You should not be out in this. It is the hottest of it. Between now and 3. I was raised in it. I shall not melt. She came to the pegged-out plan and crouched over it, her skirts in the dried grass, and put her finger on the lines before she had quite decided to. You have changed the fall of it. Yesterday you were draining downhill into the lake. This carries it east, into the old fish pond cut. Away from the silt. You said the lake was silting. He stood over her, the sun on the back of his neck, the cedar and leather scent of him cut now with clean sweat, and the green of bruised grass, and the wet iron smell of the ditch. I went and looked. The boat grounds, where it never used to. You were right, and I had been wrong about it for 2 springs, and I do not enjoy either of those things, but I am not such a fool as to go on being wrong to spare my pride. A pause. So, east into the fish pond cut. It will cost a fortnight and a great deal of digging, and the low meadows will carry a hay crop next year for the first time since my father's time, and the tenants will have their winter feed. Because you noticed a grounded boat. He looked down at her, and the jaw tick did not come, and his voice when it went on had lost its rationing. I find I am obliged to you, Miss Hartwell, and I am not a man much practiced in the word, so I will only say it the once, and ask you to believe I meant it. Clara stayed crouched over the plan a moment longer than she needed to, because her eyes had stung without her leave, and she would not have him see it, and she was furious with herself for the stinging when she had a folded will in her pocket that he did not know she carried. You are welcome, she said, and rose, and the world swam white for a half-second in the heat, and his hand came under her elbow before she had finished swaying, not gripping, only there, warm and certain, and entirely steady, the width of it spanning her arm. The calluses of the morning's spade work rough against her bare skin below the sleeve. Neither of them moved the hand away with any speed. You should drink something, he said, low, and did not let go. There is a spring at the field edge. It runs cold even now. I am quite well. She was not. She was standing in a dried meadow at noon, in the worst heat of the worst summer in memory, with a man she had been told would ruin her, and his hand was under her arm like the only cool thing in the county. And she understood, with the clean, unwelcome clarity of a figure that will not be argued with, that the thing she had bought herself 6 weeks to learn she had already, somewhere on the road between Pelham and here, begun to want. Tobias. His name came out unsteadier than she had ever let a thing be. If you knew a thing that could undo the whole bargain, if there were a flaw in it that you had hidden from me to spare yourself the asking, would you tell me, or would you let me walk into it? The hand under her elbow went still. She watched the window come down behind his eyes, but slowly, this time reluctant, as though some part of him fought the closing of it. What has he said to you? Said the Duke of Ashworth. It was not the answer. It was the proof that there was something to answer. He left 2 hours ago. She did not step back, though his hand had cooled on her arm. I asked you a question, Tobias, and you have given me his name instead of a yes or a no, which is itself a kind of answer, and not the one I hoped for. I asked you in the morning room at Pelham to be never a public husband. I will ask you something else now, here, with no servants and no county to hear it. Be never a lying one, whatever it is, the door, the will, the thing you keep warm at the end of the east gallery. I would rather have the whole hard sum of it from you, in the open, in this dreadful sun, than one more gentle lie from a kind voice that means to gut me. For one breath. One. She thought he would. She saw the word gather in him, saw his hand tighten on her arm, as though to hold them both to the place where it could be said. Then his eyes went past her, down the slope to the house, to the long east front where the gallery ran behind 100 blank hot windows, and whatever he had been about to give her he took back, the way the tide takes back what it has only lent. "Crispin Stern," said the Duke, and his voice had gone flat and weighed again, each word the same size as the one before it, "has spent 2 years wanting one thing in this world, and he will say anything, to anyone, to come at it. You have known him a day. You have known me a week. I had thought that might be worth something. I see I was mistaken, and I am too old to be surprised by it twice." He took his hand from her arm, and the noon heat rushed in where it had been, and she was colder for the loss of it than she had been all summer. "Go up to the house. Drink at the spring on the way. We will dine at 6, since you have taught me to, and we will not speak of my cousin again. There is nothing behind that door that concerns you." "It is the 3rd time you have said that to me," Clara said, very quietly, "and it was a lie the first time, and you have not improved it with practice." She did not wait for him to come down behind his window again. She turned and went up the long dried slope alone, past the grounded boat and the cracked grey plates of the lake mud, the will folded hard in her pocket, and the print of his hand still warm on her arm. And she did not look back to see whether he watched her go, because she was afraid of what it would do to her to find that he did not, and more afraid of what it would do to find that he did. She meant to leave. She told herself so all afternoon, lying on top of the coverlet in the butter-yellow room, with the blinds down, and the heat pooled thick as water, working Crispin's sum and her own over and over. If the marriage was void, she ruined them both by staying. If she went, her father's worst notes were answered, and her sisters kept their portions, and she lost only a cold man who would not give her the truth in a dried meadow, with his own hand under her arm. It was the better sum. She had built her whole life on taking the better sum. She got as far as her mother's writing box. She had it open on her knees, and the half-finished letter to her father begun, "Papa, I find I must come home," when the music started. It was not yet midnight. The heat had not yet broken. The day's last copper light still lay along the top of the wall. And from across the dark well of the house, from the east, from beyond the music room and the shrouded harp, came the one-fingered air on the slack-strung spinet, slow, stopping, starting, faltering on the 4th bar exactly as Crispin had said it would. The dust in it audible even at this distance. A man's clumsy grief, picked out a note at a time in a room he kept warm and let no one into. Clara sat with her pen dripping a slow blot onto "I find I must come home." And she listened, and she understood that she was not going to leave. Not tonight. Not while that sound was in the house. Because Crispin Stern had told her it was her cousin to be's guilt, and the housekeeper had told her it was his grief, and the Duke had told her 3 times it was nothing at all, and not one of the 3 had let her hear it for herself and judge. She set down the pen. She did not light her candle. The corridor would be darker without it carried, and she meant not to be seen. She went out barefoot into the night gallery, and the boards were warm now, the day's heat still in them, and she went east, past the dead Sterns, invisible in the dark, past the pale ghost of the shrouded harp, down the narrowing gallery to where the music came louder, and faltered, and came again. The door at the end stood open, not wide, a hand's breadth, no more, and a line of candlelight fell out of it across the runner like something spilled, and the music came through the gap, clear now, close, the slack string buzzing under each picked note, and beneath the music another sound she had not heard before, and would never afterward forget, the low, ragged, unguarded breath of a man who believes himself entirely alone. Clara stopped at the edge of the spilled light. She knew, standing there, that to step into it was to cross the one line the house had drawn, and drawn again, that whatever she saw through that hand's breadth of open door could not be unseen, by her or by him. that the woman who looked would not be the woman who had crouched over a drainage plan at noon and let his hand stay on her arm. The music stopped on the fourth bar. It did not start again. "Whoever you are," said the Duke of Ashworth from inside the warm and candle-lit and forbidden room, in a voice scraped down to the wood, "come in or go. But do not stand in my father's doorway in the dark and listen to me fail at the only thing of his I have left." And Clara Hartwell put her hand flat against the open door, warm as it had been at dawn, warm as a thing kept close to a fire, and pushed it wide. The door swung in under her hand, and the warmth came out to meet her. Not the dead heat of the August house, but a living warmth, close and golden. The warmth of a fire that had no business burning in the worst summer in memory. A small blaze sat in the grate at the far end of the room, banked low, tended, and before it, with his back to her and his shirt open at the throat and a single candle guttering on the music stand, the Duke of Ashworth sat at a spinet, his head bowed over the keys as though over a thing he was nursing. "Shut it behind you," he said, without turning, "or the drought finds him." Clara shut it. The room closed around her, small after the great cold galleries, a man's study, kept like a held breath. A coat over a chair back that no living shoulder had filled in 2 years. A pair of spectacles folded on a closed book. A pipe in a dish. And everywhere, on every surface, the small evidence of a life arrested mid-sentence, dusted daily, moved never. "Whose room?" she said, though she knew. "My father's." He pressed a key, the slack string buzzed and died. He sat where I am sitting. He could not get past the fourth bar of this either. I have had 2 years to learn it, and I cannot get past it either. And I have begun to think that is the point, and not a failing. He turned, at last, and the firelight did to his cut-stone face what no candle in the dining room had managed. It warmed it, found the boy under the Duke, showed her the wet line of road grief that had nothing to do with any road. "You were warned 3 times, Miss Hartwell. You have a great gift for the doors a wiser woman would leave shut. I am not a wiser woman." She came no closer. "I am a woman who was told by your cousin that this was guilt, and by your housekeeper that it was grief, and by you that it was nothing, and I find I cannot keep accounts on 3 different sums for the same coin. So, which is it? All 3. He set both hands flat on the keys, soundless. "Sit, if you mean to stay. You will hear it standing. I know, you hear everything standing. But I cannot say it to a woman on her feet, as though I were reading her a lease." She sat, on the edge of the father's chair, the dead man's coat at her shoulder smelling faintly still of tobacco and salt and cold years, and the Duke of Ashworth told her the thing behind the window. "They are not born cold, the Sterns," he said. "They are taught it. My father taught me, as his father taught him, that a man who shows the inside of himself is a man with a wound for the world to put its thumb in. I learnt it very well. I was the best pupil he ever had. A short breath, not a laugh. And then, the autumn before last, the night before the carriage came to take him to the coast, he came into this room and he played me that, badly, stopping, starting, and he asked me to forgive him for it. For the teaching. He had grown old, and the cold had cost him my mother, and it was costing him me, and he had only just that night seen the bill of it. The fire shifted. A coal fell. "And what did you say?" Clara asked, very low. I told him it was late in the day to discover he had a heart, and later still to expect mine to answer to a tune he could not play. The words came out of him flat and weighed, each the same size as the one before, but she saw now that the weighing was not coldness, it was a man lifting stones off a thing buried alive. I was cold to him. The last night, he held out his hand across this very keyboard and I gave him the window, because he had taught me the window, and I wanted him to feel for once what it was to stand on the wrong side of it. His jaw worked. And in the morning the carriage came, and he went to the coast, and the sea off the Lizard took the ship and every soul on it. And the last thing I ever gave my father was the look he had spent 30 years teaching me to give. Clara did not move to him, though everything in her leaned. The room held them both in its small gold warmth, and outside, very far off, she heard a sound she had not heard in 11 days. A low roll, soft, on the edge of the world. That might have been a cart on the avenue, and might have been thunder. So you keep the fire lit, she said. So the room does not go cold. Yes, he looked at his own hands on the keys as though they belonged to someone he was nursing through an illness. It is the only warmth I ever gave him. And I gave it to him too late to do him any good, and I give it to him still, every night. Because the alternative is to let this room go cold too, and then there will be nothing left in the world that I kept warm for him. The candle flame stood straight up, untroubled. Crispin calls it guilt. He is not wrong. Mrs. Pelham calls it grief. She is not wrong either. And I have told you it was nothing, 3 times. Because the truth is the one thing I have never been able to play past the 4th bar of to anyone, and I had hoped to marry without ever having to. The far roll came again, nearer, unmistakable now, and a breath of moving air came under the door at last. Cool, the first cool breath of the whole long summer. And the tune, Clara said. Finish it for me. The part you cannot play. I do not know how it ends. He said it simply. A man laying down the last stone. He could not play it. I cannot play it. He went to the coast with it unfinished, and I have sat in his chair 2 years, and it ends the same way every night, which is to say it does not end at all. That is what is behind the door, Miss Hartwell. A fire I keep for a man who cannot feel it, and a song neither of us could finish, and a son who was cold to his father on the last night of the world, and cannot forgive himself the warmth he found a day too late. He met her eyes. There you have had the whole hard sum of it, in the open, as you asked me in the meadow. I find it does not gut me to say it to you. I had thought it would. That frightens me considerably more than the saying. Outside, the thunder broke fully across the sky, and the first of the rain came down on Ashworth in a long roaring rush, the heat shattering at last after 12 days. The smell of it rising off the hot gravel and the parched lawns, and pouring in cool and green, and astonishing through the cracked window of the dead man's warm room. Clara stood, then, she crossed to the spinet, and stood beside the stool where the Duke sat, and the rain ran loud down the dark glass, and she put one finger to the keys, not to play, only to touch the same cold ivory his father's hand had touched, and his own hand touched every night. You did not give him the window on the last night, she said. You think you did. You have kept yourself 2 years on the strength of believing you did. But a cold sun does not light a fire for a man who cannot feel it. A cold sun lets the room go to dust and sells the spinet and is glad of the space. What you gave your father on the last night was the window, yes, and what you have given him every night since is this. The fire. The tune you sit and fail at so he is not failing at it alone in the dark. Her voice was not steady, and she let it not be. You were never cold, Tobias. You were taught the word for warmth was weakness, and you have spent 2 years grieving in the only language they left you, which is to keep a thing warm and tell no one why. He had gone very still under her hand where it had come, without her deciding it, to rest on his shoulder. The rain roared. The candle stood straight. You cannot finish the tune, she said, because it was never yours to finish. It was a thing he started to say to you, and the sea did not let him. So stop trying to play his half. Play your own. And she lifted his hand off the keys and held it between both of hers, the spade calluses of the morning rough against her palms, and felt the long shudder go through him that a cold man spends his whole life learning not to let the world see. I do not know how, said the Duke of Ashworth, in a voice scraped down to the grain. No, she agreed. Neither do I. We shall be very bad at it together, and frighten the servants, and play past the 4th bar by main force, and no skill at all. She pressed his hand. That is rather what I came to Ashworth to learn, as it happens. I had 6 weeks. I find I have needed considerably less. He turned his head and looked up at her, and the window, she watched it, did not come down. It simply was not there any more. There was only the man, lit gold, his father's coat at her shoulder, and his father's fire at his back, and the long-withheld rain washing 12 days of brass off the world outside, and he reached up with his free hand and laid it, very carefully, as though it might shatter, against the side of her face. "You are a great deal of management," he said, unsteady for a clause. "You are a great deal of trouble," she said, for a window, and she bent, or he rose. Neither of them could afterward have sworn which, and they met in the middle, over the dead man's spinet, in the warm gold room with the rain coming down. And the kiss was not the kiss of a contract, or a clause, or a quarter day. It was the kiss of two people, who had each been taught that warmth was a wound, finding out together, late and clumsy, and past the fourth bar, that it was not. It was a long while before Clara remembered the will folded in her pocket, and a longer while still before she was sorry she had to. "Tobias," she drew back, her hand still in his, the rain easing now to a steady green hush against the glass. "I have to show you something, and you will not like it, and you will want to put the window back up to look at it, and I am asking you not to. Not now. Not after that." The wariness came into him, but slow, and bare-faced, no shutter behind it. "What has he given you?" She took the folded sheet from her pocket and laid it open on the closed lid of the spinet, smoothing it flat with the side of her hand, the registry copy in Crispin's man's fair clerkly hand. "The will. The clause your grandmother's lawyers wrote and you never read me. Read it." The part he underlined. He read it. She watched his eyes go down the lines and stop, and she saw the blood go out of his face under the road burn. "Provided always that the said marriage be contracted in good faith, and not procured by purchase, settlement of debt, or other inducement. Any marriage so procured to be void." "He means to read it in a courtroom," Clara said, "the week after our wedding. He says the contract that brought me to you is the procuring. He says you cannot pay my father's debts and keep the estate both, that the very settlement makes the marriage void, and the land falls to him with me round your neck as a ruined duchess, and my father's notes called all the same." She kept her voice level, an accountant reading a column of bad figures aloud. "He offered to answer my father's worst notes himself, quietly, if I would leave before the banns. He called it generosity. I called it a horse-waiting, and kept his paper." The Duke set the will down very gently on the spinet lid, as though it was something that might bite. "It is true," he said. "I knew the clause. I thought, God forgive me, I thought no one would trouble to read the registry, and I would pay your father, and keep the land, and the thing would never be tried. I gambled your name on it without telling you. That is the lie you smelled in the meadow. That is the thing I would not give you with my hand on your arm." He looked at her, and there was nothing behind his eyes now but the cost of the looking. "He is right. I cannot do both. And I find, only just now, only since the rain, that I do not care which I lose, the land or the wager, so long as it is not you. Go home, Clara. Let me pay the notes as a gift, separate, after, with no marriage to void, and let the land fall to him, and burn the timber as I swore I would before he has a stick of it. I will not have you ruined to save a wood." "Sit down," said Clara, "and stop being noble at me. You are very bad at it, and we have not the time." He sat. The rain hushed against the glass. "You have read the registry copy of the will," she said, drawing a second folded paper from her other pocket, the contract, the grey waxed sheaf from Pelham, that she had brought to Ashworth because a woman who keeps accounts does not travel without her own. "You have not read lately the settlement I signed. Crispin certainly has not. He was 3 counties off when I made my terms. Listen." She unfolded it, and found the clause, and read it standing, because some things must be read standing. The portions of the said Mr. Hartwell's daughters, and the relief of his debts, to be made over to the said Mr. Hartwell as a free gift in his own name, and in no part as consideration for the marriage hereinafter agreed. The said Clara Ann Hartwell, entering into the said marriage of her own will, and for no inducement whatsoever. She lowered the paper. "My first term. Tobias, in the morning room. I said I would not have my sisters grow up knowing they were bought, and I made them write it in. The debt's a gift to my father, in his name, not held over me as a thing I had purchased with my person. I did it for Harriet and Maud. I did not know it for law. But it is law now, in your grandmother's own words against your cousins. The relief of the debts is a gift to my father, severed, in no part consideration for the marriage. And I marry you, it says here, of my own will, and for no inducement whatsoever. The Duke stared at the paper. Then at her. The settlement is not the procuring, he said slowly. The settlement says in black ink that it is not the procuring. Your grandmother's clause voids a marriage procured by settlement of debt. Mine is not. I severed it with my own first term 6 weeks before Crispin ever read a registry, for a reason that had nothing to do with wills and everything to do with 2 girls in Pelham, and it holds. She set the contract beside the will on the spinet lid, the 2 papers side by side in the candlelight, grey wax and clerk's copperplate, and the rain came down. He read the will. He did not read me. Men never do. The first time. For a moment the Duke of Ashworth said nothing at all, and then, there, in the warm gold room, over his father's silent spinet, with the 12-day heat washing off the world in a green roar, the place where a smile would go, in a man who had forgotten the road to it, found the road. It came all the way. It changed his whole face, and she saw at last what the Sterns had spent 3 generations hiding, which was that under the window the man was beautiful and warm, and had only ever been waiting for someone to read him, standing up. You bought yourself 6 weeks, he said, and saved my house with the one clause you put in to save your sisters, and you have been carrying the proof of it in your pocket since this morning, letting me be noble at you. I wanted to hear you offer to lose it all first. She folded both papers and put them away. A woman likes to know the sum before she settles the account. Now, he will come back, Tobias. A man like your cousin does not ride off triumphant and stay rode off. He will come for the banns, or for the wedding, with his registry copy and his courtroom voice, and he will try the thing in your own hall in front of your own people, because humiliation is the only inheritance he is still sure of. She looked at the door, at the gallery beyond it where the dead Sternies hung. I think we should let him come. And I think, this time, you should not send me up with Marsh. I think you should let me stand in the room. Crispin Stern came back on the 3rd morning, with the rain long gone and the world washed green, and the banns due to be read at Coombe Church that very noon, came back fast up the avenue, under the dripping oaks in his travelling chaise, with a clerk beside him, and a leather folder on his knee, and found the Duke and Miss Hartwell waiting for him not in the dining room, but in the great cold hall. Side by side, with Mrs. Pelham at the stair-foot, and Marsh at the door, and half the household arranged about the gallery above, with the stillness of people who have been told they may watch. Tobias, he came in peeling his gloves, the easy laughter already up, and the eyes already at their arithmetic, and checked, half a beat, at the company. And the clause, still in yellow. I'd half hoped to find you fled, my dear. I left you a clean road out of it. You left me a paper, said Clara. I kept it. I keep most things men hand me, Mr. Stern. It is a failing. Then keep this one too. He drew the registry copy from his folder with a flourish and laid it on the long hall table between them, the very gesture of a man laying down a winning card, and tapped it once. I'll not be unpleasant before the servants. I'm not the monster the housekeeper paints. I'll be brief. That is our grandmother's will, copied from the registry, which tells no lies. No marriage procured by settlement of debt. The settlement that pays Josiah Hartwell's notes is the procuring. The marriage is void in the making. Read the banns at noon if you like, cousin. I'll read this in Michaelmas term. And the land comes to me, and your bride keeps nothing but the name of a wife the law never allowed her. He spread his hands, almost gentle. I take no pleasure in it. She's the best thing to come into this house in 2 years. But the house is mine, and I will have it, and no clever yellow-gowned bookkeeper's daughter. Mr. Stern. Clara stepped to the table and laid her own paper down beside his, smoothing it flat, and the small click of her ring on the wood was the loudest sound in the hall. You have shown me your card. Here is mine. The settlement I signed at Pelham. Read the third clause aloud, if you would. You have such a carrying voice, and the gallery has come all this way to hear you." He did not read it aloud. He read it with his eyes, fast, and she watched the color leave him exactly as it had left his cousin 3 nights before, the same stern blood draining from the same stern jaw, and she knew the precise line his eye had stopped on. "The relief of his debts," Clara said, into his silence, for the gallery, to be made over to the said Mr. Hartwell as a free gift in his own name, and in no part as consideration for the marriage. The said Clara Ann Hartwell entering into the said marriage of her own will, and for no inducement whatsoever. She let it settle. "Your grandmother voided a marriage procured by debt. This one is not procured by debt. It says so, in my hand and your cousin's, sealed 6 weeks before you ever crawled through a registry. The debts are a gift to my father. The marriage is mine, freely. There is no procuring for your courtroom to find. You read the will, Mr. Stern. You never thought to read the woman." The hall was utterly still. Above, on the gallery, someone let out a slow breath. Crispin Stern stood with his clerk's copy under his hand, and his whole inheritance coming apart in 2 clauses of fair copperplate. And for a moment, the charm was entirely gone, and what stood in the washed morning light was only a young man who had wanted one thing in the world, and arranged his whole self around the having of it, and was watching it go. It was that flash, the bare wanting under the polish, the boy who had also been taught the window and had chosen to make a weapon of his instead of a wound, that moved Clara to the only mercy of the morning. "You have lost the house, Mr. Stern," she said, more quietly, so the gallery strained and did not quite catch it. "You have not lost everything. That is your cousin's gift to give, not mine, and I will not speak for him. But I will say this much. Since we agreed once on plainness, a man who can drive 3 counties in a day on the strength of a rumor, and read a registry no one else troubled to, and frighten a bride through a door at 2 in the morning, with nothing but a true thing, and a soft voice, is a man with a great deal more in him than spite. It is a pity. You spent it all on the one door in this house that was never going to open to you." Crispin looked at her a long moment, then at his cousin, who had not moved, who stood in his own hall, with his hands at his sides, and the window nowhere in his face. "Tobias," Crispin said, and his voice had lost its oil. It was almost, for the first time, a cousin's voice. "Is it true? The room? The fire? All of it? Is it as the county whispers, or worse?" "It is mine," said the Duke, "and it is warm, and you will never see it." A pause, and then, and Clara saw what it cost him, and loved him the more for the spending. "But you may stay to dinner, Crispin, before you go. You are the only family I have, and I have lately been taught, at some expense, what it costs a man to give the window to his own blood on a morning he might have given something else. Sit, eat, then take your chaise and your clerk and go. And do not try the thing in any courtroom, because you will lose, and I would rather you lost a wager than your name." For a moment Clara thought he would refuse it, would gather his folder and his pride, and go down the avenue triumphant in his ruin. Then Crispin Stern set the registry copy down on the table, slowly, and left it there, surrendered, his card abandoned face up for any to read, and he picked up, instead, the glass of wine Marsh had silently poured and set at his hand, and he raised it, not quite steadily, to the woman in yellow who had read him standing. "To Miss Hartwell," he said, who read the contract. "All of it." He drank. "God help you, cousin. She'll manage you to your grave, and you'll thank her for it." "I expect I shall," said the Duke of Ashworth, and reached, in his own cold hall, in front of his own household, for Clara's hand, and took it, and held it, where every soul on the gallery could see. They were married at Coombe Church a fortnight later. The banns read out 3 Sundays, running to a congregation that had come for scandal, and stayed, somewhat to its own annoyance, for a wedding, and the church porch, where the bride paused on the arm of a grey, mended, Weeping with relief, Josiah Hartwell smelled of wet stone, and the first fallen leaves, and the cool green astonishment of a country that had finally been let out of its long summer fever. Harriet wore her restored portion as a new sprigged muslin, and cried prettily. Maud, too young to know what had been bought and ungrudged, fell asleep during the second lesson against her sister's side. Of the wedding itself, the parish remembered chiefly that the cold Duke of Ashworth, who would not dance at his own coming of age, was seen to look at his bride during the vows in a manner that put two widows and a curate's wife considerably out of countenance, and smiled, twice, without any apparent encouragement at all. But that is the public account, and Clara had bargained, that first hot afternoon at Pelham, against ever being a public wife. The true account is smaller and warmer, and belongs to October. The heat was long broken by then. The lake had taken its autumn level, and the boat floated free again at the silted south end, because the low meadows now drained east into the fishpond cut, exactly as the Duchess of Ashworth had said they should over a length of cold soup in August. Frost came to the inside of the windows in the mornings. The great galleries lit their fires earlier each evening, and at the end of the east wing, the door at the end of the gallery stood open, not a hand's breadth, but wide, a fire lit in the grate as it had always been lit, and the spinet uncovered, and the dead man's coat at last folded away in a press with his spectacles and his pipe, kept, but no longer keeping watch. "You will never get past the fourth bar," Clara said from the window seat, where she sat with her mother's writing box open on her knees, and a fire at her back, and her husband at his father's spinet picking out the clumsy, starting air with one finger. "I have decided I do not need to." He played the fourth bar. He played it wrong, as his father had played it wrong, as he would always play it wrong. Then, instead of stopping, he simply went on, made up the fifth bar, and the sixth, badly, in no key God had sanctioned, a tune that no longer belonged to the man the sea had taken, but to the man who sat there now, warm, in his shirt sleeves, with the window nowhere in his face. There, it ends. I have ended it. It is a terrible ending, and I am inordinately proud of it. "It is the worst music I have ever heard," said Clara, "and I have heard Maud. You wound me, Duchess. I keep you warm, Your Grace. It is not the same thing, and it is better." She crossed to him, the boards no longer ticking in the autumn cool, and looked over his shoulder at the keys, and at the line she had underscored twice in her list once, and answered now without needing the candle. "What does he keep behind the window?" She had her answer. He kept a fire, and a song, and a place at his side on the spinet stool that he moved over to make for her without being asked, the way a man does a thing he has done 1,000 times, though he had done it only since October. "Play me your half," she said, sitting, "and I shall play the bass, very badly, and we will frighten Mrs. Pelham, who is listening at the door and pretending to dust." "I am doing no such thing, Your Grace," came Mrs. Pelham's voice, serene, through the open door, the chatelaine chiming as she went on along the gallery. "Though I'll say one thing, and not say it again, there's a deal more noise comes out of that wing than there used to, and the house is the better for it." And the Duke of Ashworth put his cold-cured, spade-calloused hand over his wife's ink, stained one on the warm ivory, and they played the terrible unfinished, now finished, tune together, past the fourth bar, past every bar, into a fire-lit October evening that smelled of wood smoke and frost and the leather of old books. Two people who had each been taught that warmth was a wound, keeping it lit anyway, badly, together, for as long as a marriage runs, which is to say for the rest of their lives. If you have ever held a door shut for years because you were afraid of what the cold would do if you opened it, and found when at last someone stubborn enough pushed it wide, that there was a fire behind it all along, then this was your story too, and I am glad you stayed by the hearth to hear it out. If Clara and her cold Duke warmed something in you tonight, light the way for the next listener, leave a comment with the line that stayed with you, and subscribe to Adrian's Fireside, where there is always another chair drawn up to the fire, and another door waiting to be opened. Sleep warm. We will keep the candle lit for you.